You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, and I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, and I was reflecting heading in here about one of the great things with this podcast kind of trucking along. Not only is it keeping me accountable to keep reading books all the time and hopefully sharing them with you and inspiring you to pick up some good ones as well, but it also affords the opportunity about a year and a half in to have some of our talented and most enjoyable guests return because they're already churning out another book. Which makes me also think, like, what have I done in that past time period? But anyways, that's for my therapist later. Okay, we are joined by an author who I enjoyed talking to her so much for her debut novel and loved the book so much. Wanda Morris, if you missed the original episode, she joined us March 21st of 2021. So we're nearly a year later. At that time, we were talking about her debut novel, All Her Little Secrets. Fantastic book, and that was a really fun conversation to get to know Wanda. And now she is back to talk about her book number 2, Anywhere You Run. It is phenomenal. It came out in October, and it got a lot of attention, well-deserved, and I think deserves a lot more attention. Named one of the top 10 crime fiction books by New York Times Book Section, and one of the best books of the year by NPR. And this is one of my favorites, and it just hit it out of the park. Wanda, thanks so much for joining me to talk about Anywhere You Run.
Thank you for having me, Olivia. It's so good to see you again.
It is wonderful to see you. And I got to say, I really, as I told you before when we were setting up here, I loved your first book. I mean, I loved it. I felt like I was in it. It was, to me, I was kind of living in this period piece that kind of made me feel like I was with the Viola Davis character in How to Get Away with Murder, kind of mixed with The Firm. Like, it had a lot of things going on for me, and I loved it. But this one, I feel like it elevated you elevated your craft as a novelist. I just felt like the way that this story was laid out, the emotion, the stress, the tension, every single thing I felt from page 1 to the very end, it was all there. So please tell the listeners what you are tackling, some very big topics and some very real characters in Anywhere You Run.
Yeah, so Anywhere You Run, I'd like to refer to it as a coming-of-age story of 2 young sisters with a few dead bodies thrown in. But it really is so much more. It is the story of Violet and Marigold Richards. And they are 2 young sisters who are growing up in the Jim Crow South of 1964, Mississippi. And Violet becomes embroiled in a murder after she is brutally attacked. But she knows as a Black woman in the Jim Crow South, she won't get justice, so she takes off running. Her sister is left behind, Marigold, and when the police show up at her door looking for Violet, she figures, I could be in a bit of trouble. And she's already in some trouble because she finds herself pregnant and unmarried, which is a big no-no for good girls in the 1960s. So she sees this as an opportunity to run as well, and she heads north. But what the 2 sisters don't realize is that there's a very dangerous man who is in pursuit of them. And he has a really unique motive for finding the women. And so the chase begins.
This is the kind of book where, I mean, you're so nervous for so much of it. And you're so invested, though, in first of all, the relationship, the struggles of these 2 young women who navigate the confines of their place, their time. I mean, it's 1964. We're starting out we're in Mississippi, and it's just the racism that they're dealing with, and the limitations, and the just constant having to swallow their pride and deal with a system that is just so infuriating and frustrating. And you actually start out the book by giving a little warning to readers or to listeners on the audiobook about some of the language and some of the violence that we're going to encounter in this story, which is very much we can't tell about Jim Crow South without using that language and really putting us there, even though now in this day and age, I mean, it's just, it is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that because we are living in a time where that language is still existing. And this book takes place, 60 years ago, in a time setting 60 years ago. But I included the author's note because, for one, words matter.
Mhm.
To me, words matter. And so when you use a racial epithet, you use a derogatory term like is used in the book, what you are saying to that person is that they are less than, that they don't matter. And I wanted to immerse the reader into what it was like to live in 1964, deep Jim Crow South. And unfortunately, that language was used. The other reason is that I think when you write in the historical genre, you owe the reader responsibility to bring a level of authenticity and accuracy to the book. And so while I would never, ever use or condone these terms, I still found them necessary in particular places in the book to bring that authentic nature to the book.
There, the title says so much and can be taken throughout the course of the book in so many different ways. I mean, really, one sister is taking off, trying to escape what very many different bad outcomes that could be presented to her based on some actions that she has really had to take because nobody will take actions on behalf of a young black woman's, safety and security in 1964 South. But that tension of really never really having a safe place to turn, with the exception of in the confines of your home with your family, and even then, you never know who's going to show up at the door or the front porch. That level of stress, it must have been so real, knowing that law enforcement doesn't care if something happens to you. You don't get to be a victim of a crime even when you are victimized. And so your choices are limited and your freedoms are so limited in so many ways, no matter where you run.
Right, right. And I tried to bring that into the book because I am a product of parents who grew up in the Jim Crow South. Both my parents are from Alabama. And I remember them telling me stories about having interactions with white people in the South and how you really did try to avoid it. My father used to always tell me how he grew up and his father before him told him, if you don't have to interact with them, then don't. Now, imagine that is kind of the upbringing. That is your instruction in how to walk about your life, is to avoid a certain person. So these young girls in the book are living under this type of suppression. They are told, if you're encountered by the police or some white person, don't look them directly in the eye, or maybe you cross the street. So just having that level of instruction is oppressive enough. And then to your point, when you know that no one is there to protect you, not the police, not government authority. And so you are having to find ways to navigate your life in the midst of this oppression and unprotectedness.
Yeah, it's just such a great book. I found myself wondering if there was some sort of character overlap on the periphery between your first novel and your next, but I think I was just looking at that because we heard of a town that I had otherwise never heard of before in my entire life. And am I saying this right? It's Chillicothe?
Yes, that's correct.
What's up with Chillicothe, Wanda?
So Chillicothe is actually a fictional town, and you did guess right. There is a bit of an Easter egg in the second book that carries over from the first book. And, Olivia, I don't know what it is about small towns. They're like catnip to me when I am writing a story because they they encapsulate everything that I think you want in a great read. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. There's secrets, there are family dynamics. And so I just think that a small town really resonates when you're trying to create tension and suspense. And so for me, I did bring that small town back into the second book from All Her Little Secrets.
You just did such a remarkable job. There's the complexity of the sisters and the differences. They're very different. They're described physically different. One is very beautiful. One is more plain. One is very brainy. One is and a rule follower. One is very wild and doesn't care. And then they have the presence that we're thinking of and reading of another sister. And so these relationships felt so intimate and real, and especially in the way that we kind of get into the minds of how they think about themselves and their faults or strengths based upon each other and that history and connection. It was really, really well executed. I mean, I felt like I knew them.
Thank you so much for that. I think anybody who has a sister relationship in their life can understand and resonate with that whole I love you to the nth degree. But also there is that twinge that, she's the smart one or she's the pretty one or, she's the rebel and she's the rule follower. And so I try to bring that dynamic in. But what is interesting is that, and it's no spoiler, there are actually three sisters. One is deceased, Rose. The thing about all three sisters is that they are all smart, but they're smart in different ways. And so while Marigold is very bookish smart, Violet is street savvy and kind of street smart. And I like to think that Rose, the deceased sister, was the sister who was smart enough to dream. She could dream of being somewhere else and something more than what Mississippi told her that she had to be. And so they're all smart while, they think the other is smart or they think the other is really pretty. And they're all beautiful girls. I mentioned in the book how their mother named them all three after flowers. So you have Rose, Marigold, and Violet. And she said when she did that, she was bringing something beautiful in the world. So it was a nod to all that oppression that this woman lived under. And she still had enough wherewithal inside of her to say, I will bring something beautiful into this world, despite all this horror that was around her that she was living in.
When we spoke last year, we were talking about your debut novel, and we talked a little bit about that you've had a successful career in law. I believe it was corporate litigation, I think. And,
correct.
And that you were, and I mean, we're looking at you, and I'm sure, we're going to think someone's going to watch you on YouTube and think you're in your 30s, Wanda. But we were talked about that you were a later in life debut novelist, and now you're back. You're a pro. How much has things changed for you in the last year? And I imagine that you must, I hope at least, that you get a lot of feedback of how exciting it is for anybody middle-aged and on to hear about a success story of someone who is successful and veers off and takes a chance and does something new and proves I can still learn something new and excel or succeed at something new.
Oh my gosh, Olivia, you hit the nail right on the head. The thought that, you just do this one thing all your life, those days are gone. They're long behind us. And I like to think that if there is something out there that you want to pursue, that you've always dreamed about doing, whether it's writing a book or opening a business or, becoming a baker, whatever it is, I am a living witness that you can do it. I mean, I've always wanted to write. I've always dreamed being a writer. I am living my dream. But I kept making excuses. I kept saying I had a job already. I have kids. I have a stressful life. Why would I go and do this? But I think it is just that perseverance that, yes, this is something that I want to do. And I think when we talked last time, I mentioned that I had started the book and put it away for 7 years with all those excuses not to write. And then I had some health challenges, and I realized, time is finite and life is short. And if I don't do this thing that I love, this thing that I'm passionate about, if I don't do it now, when would I ever do it? Now, that's not to say that I had such an easy road. I got years and years and years of rejection, but I didn't give up on the dream. And I always encourage people, don't give up on the dream. And yes, you can do it in, middle age. Right now I'm having the time of my life, better than I ever did in my 20s or 30s.
That is amazing. That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear it. And I mean, I don't even want to think about had you not pursued this, because these are two great books that people need to read. And I would hate for them to not be out there in our universe and giving us all of the things that we're going to be able to talk about and think about when we share them. So last thing, is there an update on bringing your first novel to screen, television, or film? Is that happening, Wanda?
Is that not crazy? Yes, All Her Little Secrets has been optioned for a Showtime limited series, starring and executive produced by Uzo Aduba, 3-time Emmy winner. Like, again, I tell you, Olivia, when I say I'm living the dream, trust me, I'm living the dream, right?
Oh, my goodness.
It's just incredible. And the team that they put together to do this is phenomenal. Denise Davis is another executive producer. She is one of the producers and creative partners of Issa Rae and the show Insecure. Arn Squire is the screenwriter who wrote shows like Evil, This Is Us, The Good Fight. I mean, we're talking like quality people behind the scenes on this. And so I am just ecstatic. Right now, they're writing the pilot and the second episode. So once those are greenlighted, they'll start production.
Wow. And then Wanda Morris Goes Hollywood.
Yes, darling. Where are my sunglasses?
The diva behavior is going to happen. It's going to be amazing. Oh, Wanda, I am so happy to be able to reconnect with you. Such a treat and a pleasure. The book is fantastic. Just so good. So I really applaud you for telling this story in the way that you did. It was gripping and powerful, and I think a really important read, and also just a page turner, which is the main thing.
That's the highest compliment, right? For a thriller.
we don't want to put it down, and that's the most important thing about a book. I look forward to seeing you in person soon here for an author's luncheon from the Brandeis alumni chapter in Phoenix. So that will be a treat for me. Wanda, please, thank you so much. Take care, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me, Olivia. Have a great one.
You too. Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.